Well, hey there, everybody. How's it going today? Let's just talk about society for a minute. Actually, wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about the problems that we have or the solutions that we can provide. But originally, I got up this morning and tried to get a few things done, and I was thinking, what kind of a video do I want to make today? And so I took some notes about in my head mentally, I guess, about politics and the political situation. Then I thought about the climate situation. Then I took some physical notes from the PMRC and going through the 80s and how rock music was considered satanic. And I had all these ideas in my mind, and I thought, it's very difficult to talk about small things of the past, like, you know, parental advisory stickers or uh, Tipper Gore, which I'm going to make a video about that down the road here. But it's difficult to talk about mundane things when there are such important topics to discuss. But the other side of this is if all you talk about is important topics, things can get depressing really fast. And so I want to make sure to clarify the fact that this isn't supposed to be depressing. I've talked a little bit about the chaos that we're going to endure as humans. I've talked about the future of humanity, which is all we can do is speculate. We have no idea what's going to happen. Talked about AI in the future, and somebody mentioned Ray Kurzweil, who I forgot to mention, is a great author, a futurist, if you will, who I guess a futurist would be someone who tries to predict or guess what it might be like in the future. But let's go back to the 60s and say, well, if the futurists of that time were any good, they would have been able to predict today better. And honestly, we thought we'd have flying cars. It gives us an image of what humans have really gone for as opposed to what we thought humans were going to go for. We thought that we wanted a life of leisure, for example. There was a time when we worked so hard as people, we thought all we wanted to do was create machines and robots to serve us, and we could live the rest of our lives eating grapes like kings. And then we found out that if you spend too much time without doing anything, without working, without having some sort of a goal or, anything in mind in life that moves you, you become neurotic. You start to lose your mind. Everyone who there's this idea that a lot of people out there don't want to work because they don't have jobs. The reality is most people do want to work and actually enjoy feeling like they're part of something. So, with that in mind, there's an aspect of us that wants to do good things or great things, whether it's for ourselves or for others. Now, this is important because it's kind of the basis for where I'm going with this video. This morning when I read an article on Vice, and it was pretty long. It was a pretty long article for a Vice article, and it took me maybe 15 minutes to read it. And it spoke to a couple of scientists, different scientists who had different ideas about where we were going as a species in the future. And of course there is the initial climate doom scientist who says, look, if we don't change our ways right now, we're going to run out of food, we're going to run out of oil, we're going to run out of all these different things. We've heard about peak oil, we've heard about crop failures, monoculture, over farming, overgrazing, chopping down the rainforest. All of it is just like, overwhelming. And we don't know where to put our energy or what even matters. Part of us says we've got to change our ways for the future. Another part says, well, shit, I have a short life here. I've got to get what I can done and enjoy myself while I'm here. So I'm not going to deprive myself completely of driving a car or, only walk everywhere I go. It's just not realistic for most people. For city dwellers, the idea that you can just take the bus everywhere, that might be feasible. But when I was a carpenter for years, I had to carry my tools. I had to drive a truck. I had to drive a van. I had to be able to get my tools to work to do the things I needed to do. So we all decide which aspects we can do our best on. Recycle as much as possible. We do all these little things as if being consumers is going to save the planet. Now let me say this first off. The planet's not going anywhere. We are. And that's a famous line by George Carlin. Bless his soul. He talked about this kind of stuff quite often. The fact that humans are so arrogant that we think that we are really going to destroy the planet. The planet has gone through many cycles, and we're going through a cycle of change right now. And I want to get that out of the way to say it doesn't matter whether or not we how much we are affecting the climate. I mean, it matters, but it's irrelevant to the fact that the Earth has changed regularly through history. We can look at core samples, we can look at the layers, and we can say, oh shit, we're in for, whether it's a 12,000 year catastrophe, a 5,000 year catastrophe, a 26,000 or 72,000 year cycle. There are many different speculations out there about what might happen. But people are looking at natural disasters, and then they're looking at the climate. There's another aspect of it that's completely out of our control. And that's the fact that since I was born, we doubled our population. We have over 7.5 billion people on this planet, and the projections for where we're going go anywhere between 8 and 10 billion. And then the idea is that they believe it's going to level off. That the population may even decline sooner than that. But no one can know. And the reason why is simple. There are too many factors in play. There are too many variables within our climate, as well as our society, our economy, how fast we run out of resources, how well we manage ourselves, whether we change our behaviors, whether we're even able to remedy some of our errors. But ultimately, I'm not blaming humans for all the problems. I'm saying that humans have a natural tendency, as I said earlier, to work and to want to build and to create. Something that nature ingrained us with. It's in our DNA. We're curious. We seek things out. And now we're beating ourselves up over it. Now, there was a time 50 years ago when people said, look at all this magnificent stuff we've built. And nobody in the 50s was looking at society as a negative thing. Sure, and then into the 60s, there were sure people protesting war, but very few people were protesting progress. Medicines helped us live longer, better packaged foods that lasted longer, and more availability. And as much as there's still suffering and starving and death today, we've brought a huge amount of the world out of poverty during a time when we doubled our population. We've come a long way as a species. And now we're sitting on the precipice of human evolution, which I believe I'm living in the time right now where we are at our peak our peak population, right? Anything could happen tomorrow which could trigger a worldwide catastrophe. If you look at what's happening in Syria and you think it's just a war, a random war for land, you miss the point. They've had major drought over there. Food has been scarce, and the one thing that leads people to migrate and to fight is a lack of proper drinking water, lack of food, and lack of ability to grow your own food. And that's just one small example of what we're probably going to be facing in the future. I read that Africa is supposed to double its population within the next 30 years. Double. And that's just one prediction, of course. Whereas America is supposed to be on the decline because we are having a lower birth rate and less interest in having kids. Meanwhile, we're fighting and resisting migration. So what that leads to is a society that's aging and in decline without anyone else to, carry it into the future. And America, unfortunately, has lost its leadership role in the world due to our own hubris, our arrogance, our ability to think that we're a large army and a large nuclear arsenal is going to protect us into the future. So what I'm saying is this. I'm being reasonable in my assessment of society. I try to be rational in my ability to look at things with a neutral viewpoint and realize that it's a pipe dream to think that humans are just going to live in this perfect world where everyone's kind to one another, because even in natural various species and other pockets within nature, there's always the erratics. Okay, that's the word I'm looking for. The erratics that something just didn't work out. Perhaps there's a bad attitude, a flaw in evolution, or a flaw in the brain of one creature which causes havoc among others. And what I'm saying is, you can't live without chaos and a little bit of turmoil, because it's what makes life interesting. That said, the turmoil we're facing right now is something that is out of our minds, out of our control, and out of our ability to really think through it. When I talked about AI the other day, do I think artificial intelligence will be the death of us? Maybe. No, not likely. The reason being because Technology requires energy. Energy requires electricity and power. And all it would take is one major solar flare or, a nuclear attack. I mean, a lot of folks don't realize that, there were plenty of nuclear detonations done in the atmosphere. And there was one done over Hawaii, which took out like a huge part of the grid, blew a bunch of transformers, and created a blackout for a while. This has happened in various places around the world. Electromagnetic pulse, a very simple one, could take down the banking system, the grid. And think about this. This is something you cannot overstate. We rely on electricity. If the grid goes down and you can't get money out of the bank and you can't buy anything at the grocery store and people can't ship things to the grocery store or operate the warehouse, I would say this is the most crucial aspect of what I'm saying here. Learn to grow your own food. Learn to be self-sufficient. Something as simple as buying a survival book, a big, thick survival book. I found one at Goodwill a while back for like $5, and it was just loaded with first aid, everything you could imagine. We overlook these things as just, well, I'll just Google it when I need it. And let me tell you something. We're living in a time now where we have more access to information and products than ever before. And a lot of these things would be like gold after a disaster. And right now they're readily available, cheaply. Amazon, eBay, wherever else. You can buy solar panels. You can set yourself up with water filtration systems. You can buy yourself buckets of food, freeze-dried MREs that are good for 20 years or more. And I have like 4 of those buckets in my garage on the floor where it's nice and cool, and they've been there for 8 years or more. When I started my YouTube channel, all right, around 2011, I was talking a lot about prepping. I was kind of sucked into the 2012 thing. I've thought my whole life that I'm going to live through a disaster. Don't know why. It's just, I felt it in my soul. And this may be a slow disaster that's unfolding right now. It's not that I believe a comet's going to hit or the world's going to explode or a major worldwide earthquake or tsunamis, but they may be localized events that gradually cause a domino effect. Because in the old days, if one nation failed, the rest could carry on. These days, we are so intertwined in our trade, in our system of communication, that if one disaster hits, it can just create a domino effect as we have migration and loss of food and fertile land. And people, a lot of these farmlands are going into drought right now. I mean, we are in a serious crisis that we haven't realized yet. We're running out of water, we're running out of food, and a lot of folks out there are already seeing this in their community. But unfortunately, most of the people who are watching this video live in Western societies where we have everything at our disposal. We can still turn on the tap, can still run a bath, and I'm grateful every time I can go to the refrigerator and I have electricity to keep my food cold, and then I can go to the store. There used to be like a 72-hour rule for stores, that they would only have enough food for 72 hours. That's when I first started prepping. Now they say it's less than a 24-hour rule. Stores are continuously bringing food in, so if something hits tomorrow, it's not like you're going to be able to just go stock up at will whenever you choose. There are a lot of people crammed into very small societies. So I guess this is somewhat not foreboding. It's not a warning as much as being aware and preparing yourself, because I don't feel like I'm worried about any major disasters. I feel like I'm prepared. I feel like I have enough food to last me until I can get some shit done. I really want to stock up on some more solar panels and use them with LED grow lights, so I could just have the panels on my roof if there wasn't power for a long period of time, and just have grow lights in my garage. Grow lettuce, grow carrots, tomatoes, whatever you choose to grow. If you don't know how to grow it, then you're in for some trouble. And we have separated ourselves from nature and food so much, and I'm guilty too. I mean, yes, I understand where my vegetables come from, but I've never gone out and killed animals for my own meat. And I understand that we are really separate, we see it in the package. I have gone down to the river and caught 2 big-ass coho salmon and limited out, and I cut them open and I gutted them and I pulled out the eggs, the roe, and I stored it and salted it and used it for bait to catch more fish, and cooked up the coho. So yeah, I know how to fish at least, but I live in a place where we have fish, and that's on the decline too. When I talk about a utopia and a disaster, what I mean is this. I believe that we're in for some hard times in the future, and there's absolutely no way around it. We have far too many people for the food system that we have in place. And this could change, but it's not changing at any speed where we can see it actually making an impact yet. But that's why it's up to the individual. Don't wait for the government to bail you out. Don't expect that you're going to be saved when something happens. It's up to all of us to use our brains, use our books and our smarts to be able to actually look these things up now. Because if you wake up tomorrow morning and the power's out, that means the internet's out. And if it's out for months on end, do you have a ham radio? Do you have any way to listen to people? Do you have a CB? Any type of, citizen type broadcasting system? Most people don't. And it's a pity because during my prepping days, I bought a couple of ham radios too. Just small ones, but enough to where I could go out and at least seek communication. Because everyone would be confused, just like you. And you wouldn't be able to look to see what's going on. I mean, these are just things that I think about. Because if they happen, I don't want to be left holding the bag, right? I want to be able to protect my family and myself. And so, that's all I got for this one. Thanks for listening, and just be prepared for anything. But most of all, I think this is going to be a steady decline into the future where our children are going to have to suffer because of many of the decisions that were made, but also just because of the natural progression of the world and its inability to save, or should I say, its inability to harbor as many people as we have right now. But I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. And I hope we pull ourselves out of whatever situation we might encounter. Humans are very innovative. We do find a way. So a lot of the doom and gloom about the future may be, maybe overstated, but maybe not. It all depends on where we put our time and money. And as long as we're more focused on profits for the shareholders than we are from improving the lives of all people, we're on the wrong path. And the first sign of a decline of our natural world has been shown itself already, but the first sign of a decline of a major empire or a world system is an overload of bureaucracy, which means that a society gets so large that you have to create more and more laws to protect more and more sections of the society. And as the laws get more and more complex, you have to hire more and more people against those laws and people to sightsee over those laws. And this is where all societies in history have fallen apart. Overload of bureaucracy. And so, if nothing else, that's where we're at as a nation. And when the government falls apart, you have to be just as prepared, because I think that the world could go on without a government, but there's, I should say the nation, but, I guess we'll see. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Well, as great as you can after all this apocalyptic shit.